Don't forget to subscribe. Afterwards, the wisest and most spiritual books from the greatest authors await you every day. And now buckle up, sit back and we'll begin. Hazrat Inayat Khan. The mysticism of music, sound and word. The ego. When we think of that sense, that feeling, or that inclination that makes us affirm the word I, we realize that it is difficult to point out what this I is, what its character is. For it is something that is beyond human comprehension. That is why a person who wishes to explain, even to himself, what it is, points to what is nearest to him, declaring, "This is the one whom I have called I." Therefore, every soul who has, so to speak, identified itself with anything has identified itself with the body, its own body, because that is the thing that one feels and realizes to be immediately next to one, and that is intelligible as one's being. So, what a person knows of himself, as the first thing, is his body. He calls himself his body, he identifies himself with his body. For instance, if one asks a child, "Where is the boy?" he will point to his body. That is what he can see or can imagine of himself. This forms a conception in the soul. The soul conceives this deeply, so that after this conception, all other objects, persons or beings, color or line, are called by different names. The soul does not conceive of them as itself, for it already has a conception of itself, this body, which it has first known or imagined to be itself. All else that it sees through its vehicle, that is the body, and calls it something next to it, something separate and different. In this way, duality in nature is produced. From this comes I and you. But as I is the first conception of the soul, it is fully concerned with this I, and with all else it is only partly concerned. All other things that exist, besides this body which it has recognized as its own being, are considered according to their relation with this body. This relation is established by calling them mine, which is between I and you. As, "You are my brother," or "my sister," or "my friend." This makes a relationship, and according to this relationship, the other object or person stands nearer to or farther from the soul. All other experiences that the soul has in the physical world and in the mental spheres become a sort of world around it. The soul lives in the midst of it, yet the soul never for one moment feels with anything that it is I. This I it is reserved and made captive in one thing, only the body. Of everything else, the soul thinks that it is something else, something different, as, "It is near to me, it is dear to me, it is close to me, because it is related. It is mine, but it is not me." I stands as a separate entity, holding, attracting, collecting all that one has, and which makes one's own world. As one becomes more thoughtful in life, so this conception of I becomes richer. It becomes richer in this way, that one sees, it is not my body only, but it is also the thought that I think that is my thought, the imagination is my imagination, my feelings are also a part of my being. Therefore, I am not only my body, but I am my mind also. In this next step that the soul takes on the path of realization, it begins to feel, I am not only a physical body, but also a mind. This realization in its fullness makes one declare, I am a spirit, which means body, mind and feeling, all together, with which I identify myself. It is these that are the ego. When the soul goes farther on the path of knowledge, it begins to find that, yes, there is something that feels itself, that feels the inclination to call itself I. There is a feeling of I-ness, but at the same time, All that the soul identifies itself with is not itself. The day when this idea springs up in the heart of man, he has begun his journey on the path of truth. Then analyzing begins, and he begins to find out, when this is my table and this is my chair, all that I can call mine belongs to me, but is not really myself. Then he also begins to see, I identify myself with this body, but this is my body, just as I say my table or my chair. So the being who is saying I in reality is separate. It is something that has taken even this body for its use. This body is only an instrument. And he thinks, if it is not this body which I can call I, then what else is there that I can call so? Is it my imagination with which I should identify myself? But even that he calls my imagination, my thought, or my feeling. So, even thought, imagination or feeling is not the real I. What affirms I remains the same, even after having discovered the false identity. We read in the 10th Sufi thought that perfection is achieved by the annihilation of the false ego. The false ego is what does not belong to the real ego and what that ego has wrongly conceived to be its own being. When that is separated by analyzing life better, then the false ego is annihilated. A person need not die for it. In order to annihilate this body, in order to annihilate the mind, a person has to analyze himself and see, where does I stand? Does it stand as a remote exclusive being? If it is a remote and exclusive being, then it must be found out. The whole spiritual process is to find this out. Once this is realized, then the work of the spiritual path is accomplished. As in order to make the eyes see themselves, one has to make a mirror to see the reflection of these eyes. So, in order to make this real being manifest, this body and mind have been made as a mirror, that in this mirror this real being may see itself and realize itself as being independent. What we have to achieve by the path of initiation, by the way of meditation, by spiritual knowledge, is to realize this by making ourselves a perfect mirror. In order to explain this idea, the fakirs and dervishes have told a story. A lion roaming through the desert found a little lion cub playing with the sheep. It so happened that the little lion had been reared with the sheep, and so had never had a chance or an occasion to realize what he was. The lion was greatly surprised to see a young lion cub running away with the same fear of the lion as the sheep. He jumped in among the flock of sheep and roared, "Halt, halt!" But the sheep ran on and the little lion ran also. The lion pursued only the cub, not the sheep, and said, "Wait, I wish to speak to you." The cub answered, "I tremble, I fear, I cannot stand before you. Why are you running about with the sheep? You are a little lion yourself." "No, I am a sheep. I tremble, I am afraid of you. Let me go. Let me go with the sheep." "Come along," said the lion, "come with me. I will take you and I will show you what you are before I let you go." Trembling, yet helpless, the lion cub followed the lion to a pool of water. There the lion said, "Look at me, and look at yourself. Are we not closer, are we not near? You are not like the sheep, you are like me." Through the whole spiritual process, what we learn is to disillusion this false ego. The annihilation of this false ego is its disillusionment. When once it is disillusioned, then the true ego realizes its own merit. It is in this realization that the soul enters the kingdom of God. It is in this realization that the soul is born again, a birth that opens the doors of heaven. Question: must a true self have mind and body in order to be conscious of itself? Answer: the true self need not have mind and body for its existence. It does not depend upon mind and body for its existence, for its life, just as the eyes do not depend upon a mirror to exist. They only depend upon the mirror to see their reflection. Without it, the eyes will see all things, but they will never see themselves. Another example is intelligence. The intelligence cannot know itself unless it has something intelligible to hold, then the intelligence realizes itself. A person with poetic gift who is born a poet never realizes himself to be a poet until he has put his ideas on paper and his verse has struck a chord in his own heart. When he is able to appreciate his poetry, that is the time that he thinks, "I am a poet." Until then, there was a gift of poetry in him, but he did not know it. The eyes do not become more powerful by looking in the mirror. Only, the eyes know what they are like when they see their reflection. The pleasure is in realizing one's merits, one's gifts, what one possesses. It is in realizing that the merit lies. No doubt it would be a great pity if the eyes thought, "We are as dead as this mirror," or, if in looking into the mirror, they thought, "We do not exist except in the mirror." So, the false self is the greatest limitation. Question: is not our murshid our mirror? Answer: no. The murshid stands in the place of the lion in the fable. But the pool of water is necessary. Question: though the soul feels apart from the different bodies, does it not feel one with God? Answer: not even with God. How could it? A soul that is captive in a false conception, who cannot see a barrier lifted up between itself and its neighbor, how can this soul lift its barrier to God whom it has not known yet? For every soul's belief in God is a conception after all, because it is taught by a priest, because it is written in scripture, because the parents have said that there is a God. That is all. That soul knows that somewhere there is a God, but it is always liable to change its belief, and unhappily, the farther it advances intellectually, the farther it goes from that belief. A belief that is pure intelligence cannot always hold, will not go far with a person. It is by the understanding of that belief that the purpose of life is fulfilled. It is said in the Gaon, the uncovering of the soul is the discovering of God. Question: how does the true self dismiss mind and body in death? Answer: it is not easy for the true self to dismiss mind and body when a person cannot dismiss in life his thoughts of depression, sorrow and disappointment. The impressions of happiness and sorrow in the past one holds in one's own heart, prejudice and hatred, love and devotion, everything that has gone deep in oneself. If that is the case, then even death cannot take them away. If the ego holds its prison around itself, it takes this prison with it, and there is only one way of being delivered from it, and that is through self-knowledge. Question: does a person immediately after death identify himself with his mental body, or still with the dead corpse? Answer: the mental body is just as the dead corpse. There is no difference because the one is built on the reflection of the other. For example, one does not see oneself different in the dream when the mind is in a normal condition. If the mind is abnormal, then one can see oneself as a cow, or as a horse, or as anything. But if the mind is normal, one cannot see oneself different from what one knows oneself to be. Therefore, the mental being is the same as one sees oneself in the dream. In the dream, one does not see the loss of the physical body. One is running or eating or enjoying in the dream, one does not realize the absence of the physical body. The same thing is in the hereafter. The hereafter does not depend upon a physical body to experience life fully. The sphere, in itself, is perfect, and life is experienced perfectly. Question: is the ego completely destroyed by annihilation? Answer: the ego, itself, is never destroyed. It is the one thing that lives, and this is the sign of eternal life. In the knowledge of the ego, there is the secret of immortality. When it is said in the Gaian, death dies, and life lives, it is the ego that is life, it is its false conception which is death. The false must fall away someday, the real must always be. So it is with life. The true living being is the ego, it lives. All else that it has borrowed for its use from different planes and spheres, and in which it has become lost, all that is put away. Do we not see this with our own body? Things that do not belong there do not remain in it, in the blood, in the veins, anywhere. The body will not keep them, it will repel them. So it is in every sphere. It does not take what does not belong to it. All that is outside it keeps outside. What belongs on earth is kept on earth, the soul repels it. The destroying of the ego is a word, it is not destroying, it is discovering. Often people are afraid when reading Buddhist books, where the interpretation of nirvana is given as annihilation. No one wants to be annihilated, and people are very much afraid when they read annihilation. But it is only a matter of words. The same word in Sanskrit is a beautiful word, mukti. The Sufis call it fana. If we translate it into English, it is annihilation, but when we understand its real meaning, it is going through or passing through. Passing through what? Passing through the false conception, which is a first necessity, and arriving at the true realization. Mind and heart, thought, memory, will and reason, together with the ego as the fifth and principal factor, constitute the heart. It is these five things that may be called the heart, but indefinitely naming the different parts of this heart, we call the surface of it mind, and the depth of it heart. If we imagine this heart as a lantern, then the light in the lantern makes it the spirit. We call the heart a lantern when we do not think of the light. However, when there is a light, then we forget the word lantern, and we call it light. When we call the heart spirit, it does not mean spirit void of heart, as it does not mean light without lantern, but light in the lantern. The right use of the word spirit, however, is only as the essence of all things. The essential light and life from which all has come, that is the spirit. But we use the word spirit also in a limited sense, just as light is the all-pervading light of the sun, and at the same time the light in the lantern, which we call light also. People call a part of the breast, heart. The reason is that there is a part in this body of flesh that is most sensitive to feeling, and naturally, as man cannot grasp the idea of a heart outside of the body, he conceives this idea of the heart as being a part of his physical body. The ego stands separate from the four faculties of thought, memory, will and reason. It is just like four fingers and thumb. Why is the thumb not called a finger? Because the thumb is the whole hand. These four are faculties, but the ego is a reality. It holds and accommodates within itself the four faculties, and in order to distinguish it as different from them, we call it ego. As the surface of the heart is known by the imagination and thought, so the depth of the mind, which is heart, is known by feeling. The difference between thought and imagination is that imagination is an automatic working of the mind. If the mind is fine, then there is a fine imagination. If the mind is gross, then there is a gross imagination. If there is a beautiful mentality, then the imagination is beautiful. Thought is also imagination, but imagination held, controlled and directed by will. Therefore, when we say he is a thoughtful person, it means that this person does not think, speak or act on impulse, but behind everything he does, there is willpower that controls and directs the action of his mind. There are 9 principal feelings that can be distinguished as mirth, grief, anger, passion, sympathy, attachment, fear, bewilderment and indifference. Feelings cannot be limited to these 9, but when we distinguish numerous feelings, we may reduce them to these 9 distinct feelings that we experience in life. There are 6 diseases that belong to the heart: passion, anger, infatuation, conceit, jealousy and covetousness. The more one thinks on the subject of the heart, the more one finds that, if there is anything that can tell us of our personality, it is the heart. If there is anything through which we feel ourselves or know what we are, it is the heart and what our heart contains. Once a person understands the nature, the character and the mystery of the heart, then he understands, so to speak, the language of the whole universe. There are 3 ways of perception. One way of perception belongs to the surface, to the mind. It is thought. Thought manifests to our mind with a definite form, line and color. The next way of perception is feeling. It is felt by quite another part of the heart. It is felt by the depth of the heart, not by the surface. The more the heart quality is awakened in a person, the more he perceives the feelings of others. That person is sensitive because to him, the thoughts and feelings of others are clear. The one who lives on the surface does not perceive feelings clearly. Also, there is a difference between the evolution of the two, of the one who lives on the surface of the heart and the other who lives in the depths. In other words, the one lives in his mind and the other lives in his heart. There is still a third way of perception that is not even through feeling, and that may be called a spiritual language. This perception comes from the deepest depths of the heart. It is the voice of the spirit. It does not belong to the lantern, it belongs to the light, but in the lantern, it becomes clearer and more distinct. This perception may be called intuition. There is no better name for it. In order to study life fully, these 3 perceptions must be developed. Then, alone, is one able to study life fully. And it is in studying life fully that one is able to form a judgment upon it. Question: could you explain further how the mind is the surface of the heart and the heart the depth of the mind? Answer: there are 5 fingers, but 1 hand. There are several organs of the body, but 1 body. There is a universe full of variety, but 1 spirit. So, there is 1 heart that feels the various thoughts and imaginations that spring up and then sink into it. The bubbles are to be found on the surface of the sea. The depth of the sea is free from bubbles. The commotion is to be seen on the surface, the depth of the sea is still. The mind is the commotion of that something that is within us, that something which we call heart. The happiness, knowledge, pleasure and love that is stored in our innermost being is in our profound depth. Changing emotions and passions, dreams, ever-rising thoughts and imaginations, all belong to the surface, as the bubbles belong to the surface of the sea. Question: can we say that the heart is nearer to the soul, and the mind nearer to the body? Answer: yes, in a certain way. But at the same time, The soul experiences through the whole being, through the body, through the mind, through the heart, as it happens to be in different planes of existence. Question: is the heart one of the soul's bodies? Answer: certainly. The heart is one of the bodies of the soul, the finest body. It goes a long way with the soul, even on its return journey. Question: is the heart the same as the angelic body? Answer: yes, quite true. Question: is it, therefore, that the Catholics have a special devotion for the Sacred Heart of Jesus? Answer: of course. The heart is the shrine of God. If God is ever to be found anywhere, it is in the heart of man, especially in the heart of that man in whom the divine manifests. Question: is the heart the home of the soul? Answer: yes, one may call the heart a home of the soul, but I would call it a temporary hotel. Question: is the world of feelings higher than the world of thoughts? Answer: yes. Question: what is indifference? Answer: this is a word that I always find difficult to explain, and I have made many people angry by talking about indifference. They say, where is the love that you have come to preach to us? Indifference is quite contrary to love, to the message and the teaching. When people read in Buddhism and Yajism about renunciation, nirvana, vairagya, which in Sufi terms of the Persian poets is fana, they begin to ask, have they all taught to become indifferent? Have they taught such cruelty? In reality, it is quite a different thing. Indifference is not lovelessness, nor is it lack of sympathy. Indifference is most useful at the time when a soul has arrived at that sensitiveness, when every little thing hurts. Then it is only indifference which keeps it alive. You might say that it is not good to be sensitive. Yes, but without being sensitive, you cannot evolve. Sensitiveness is a sign of evolution. If you are not sensitive, then you cannot feel in sympathy with your fellow men. If you do not feel the feelings of your fellow men, then you are not yet awakened to life. Therefore, in order to become a normal human being, one has to develop sensitiveness, or at least to arrive at sensitiveness. When you are sensitive, then life becomes difficult to live. The more sensitive you are, the more thorns you will find on your way. Every move you make, at every turn, at every step, there is something to hurt you. It is only one spirit that you can develop, and that is the spirit of indifference, yet, not taking away the love and sympathy you have for another. That is the right indifference. To say to a person, I do not care for you because you have been thoughtless, that is not the right kind of indifference. That is not the indifference that mystics relate as being vairagya. The mystical indifference is that the soul retains sympathy and love, even at the thoughtlessness of a person, and expresses it as forgiveness. In the Bible, we read the words of Christ, turn the other side of your face if a person has struck you on one side. What else is this than the lesson of indifference? How can a sensitive person, a person of feeling, a spiritual, tender-hearted person, live in this world if he is not indifferent? He cannot live here one moment. There is only this one thing that protects him from the continual jarring influences that come from all sides. Question: why not call it detachment? Answer: detachment is not really the right word. We cannot be detached, we are never detached. Life is one and nothing can separate it. Detachment is only an illusionary aspect of life. There is no such thing as detachment in truth. How can there be detachment when life is one? Often, in order to make it clearer, I have said that indifference and independence are two meanings of that one word, vairagya. Indifference, alone, explains it only halfway. Intuition and dream. Intuition rises from the depths of the human heart. It has two aspects. One is dependent upon an outer impression, and the other is independent of any outer impression. The former is called impression, and the latter intuition. Intuition is a fine faculty. As it comes by responsiveness, it is a feminine faculty. Woman, therefore, is more intuitive by nature than man. Often one says this person gives me such and such an impression, but there is no reason to prove it. One is perhaps not capable of finding any reason to prove it, nevertheless one's impression is right. There are some people who are naturally intuitive. For someone who is intuitive, it is not necessary to wait until he, so to speak, finds a person out. All he needs is one moment. As soon as his eyes fall upon the person, this instantly gives rise to an impression, which is the former kind of intuition. Someone with a fine mind and with a still mind generally has intuition. Someone with a gross mind and a restless mind lacks it. Intuition is a super sense. It may be called a sixth sense. It is the essence of all senses. When a person says he sensed something, it does not mean that there were objective reasons to prove that it was so. It means that, without any outer reasons or objective signs, he has sensed it. Intuition that is independent of impressions is of a still deeper nature, for it comes before one wishes to begin a thing, and so one knows what will come out of it. Before the beginning of an enterprise, one senses the result of it. Intuition is sometimes a kind of inner guidance, and sometimes it is a kind of warning from within. How does one perceive intuition? It is first expressed in the language of feeling. That feeling, spreading within the horizon of the mind, shapes itself and becomes more narrative of its idea. Then the mind turns it into a form, and then language interprets it. Therefore, it is the feeling heart to which intuition belongs. In order to become clear so that it can be distinguished, intuition turns into three different conditions: into a feeling, into an imagination, or into a phrase. The person who hears the voice of intuition, even when it is in its first process of development, is more capable of perceiving intuition, and it is he who may be called intuitive. Another person distinguishes it when it expresses itself in the realm of thought. Then there is a third person who can only distinguish his intuition when it is manifest in the form of a phrase. It is the kind person, the loving person, the pure-hearted person, the person of goodwill, who is intuitive. Intuition has nothing to do with learning. An unlettered person can be much more intuitive than one who is most qualified, for intuition lies in another domain of knowledge and comes from quite another direction. Very often, an intuitive person makes a mistake in catching the right intuition, for the intuition comes from one side, while his mind reacts from the other side, and he does not know which is which. If he takes the action of his mind for intuition and is once disappointed, then he loses faith in himself. So, naturally, he no longer gives thought to intuition, and that faculty diminishes in him more and more every day. To catch an intuition is the most difficult thing, for in a moment's time, both are working intuition on the one hand and mind on the other. It is as if two ends of a stick placed in the center upon another stick were to move up and down, and one did not notice which end rose first and which end rose after. Therefore, one needs to take a very keen notice of the actions of the mind, and this ability is gained by a thorough practice of concentration. One must be able to look at one's mind just as at a slate placed before one. While looking at it, one must be able to shut oneself off from all sides, fixing one's mind solely upon one's inner being. By developing concentration, by stilling the mind, one can be tuned to the pitch that is necessary to perceive intuition. If one has once been disappointed in perceiving one's intuition, then one must not lose courage. One must go on following it, even if it continues to be a mistake. If one continually follows one's intuition, then one will come to the right perception of it. The dream is another wonder, a phenomenon of the mind. In the dream, it is not only imagination and thought that work, but also intuition. Intuitions that arise in the waking state arise in the dream state and become clearer, for at that time a person is naturally more concentrated, his eyes being closed to the outer world. However, then, also there is the same problem: no sooner has intuition risen from the depths than imagination rises from the surface, and one does not know which is which. That is why many dreams are confused. A part of the dream is expressive of some truth, and a part of the dream is confused. There is no dream that has no meaning. If the dream has nothing to do with intuition, then it is a purely automatic activity of all that the mind has gone through in one's work during the day. The same activity goes on automatically, just like a moving picture before one. Yet, even behind that there is a meaning, for nothing is projected on the curtain of the mind that does not take root in the soil of the heart, producing similar flowers and fruits. If, in the dream, intuition is working, then the dream is narrative of something in the past, present or future. There is, however, a kind of dream that shows everything upside down, just like a mirror that shows a fat person thin and a thin person fat, a tall person short and a short person tall. So, there also comes a condition of the mind where everything shows quite the contrary to what it is. This fault can be traced as the fault of the mind. The mind has been turned upside down, and therefore, all that a person sees looks upside down, especially in that dream state. Sometimes this dream shows quite the opposite to what was, what is, and what is going to be. If a person did not understand this nature of the dream, then he would interpret it quite contrarily to its real nature. There are dreams that may be called visions. They are reflections of persons, of their minds, of worlds, of planes on which the mind has become focused. If the mind is focused on a certain world, then the dreams are of that world. If a person is focusing his mind upon himself, then his own thoughts come to him. If the mind is focused on a certain person, then that person and what is within him is reflected in the dream. If the mind is focused on a certain plane of being, then the conditions of that plane are reflected upon the mind. The deeper one goes into this subject, the more one finds that in the understanding of the dream, in its nature, its mystery, its character, one understands the secret of the whole life. Question: could you please tell us about the difference between impulse and intuition? Answer: the impulse of an intuitive person is often guided by intuition, but the impulse of a person who lacks intuition may come from another direction. It may come from the surface. Impulse directed by intuition is desirable. Impulse is just like a little straw floating on the surface of the water. This straw becomes an impulse when it is pushed by a wave that is coming from behind. For a right impulse, man gets credit. For a wrong impulse, he is blamed. Yet, if one saw what was behind the impulse, one would be slow to express an opinion on the subject. Question: how do you explain symbolical dreams? Answer: the symbolical dream is the working of a subtle mind, and it is a most wonderful working. As subtle as is the mentality, so subtle is the symbol in which the intuition or the thought is expressed. Therefore, it has been very easy for the mystics to see the evolution of a person from his dreams. The subtler his dreams, the subtler the person is in his evolution. Nevertheless, the virtue is not only in subtlety, the virtue is in simplicity. Poets, musicians, thinkers, writers, people of imagination, have wonderful dreams, and the splendor of their dreams is in their marvelous symbology. Question: is it the study of symbols that develops intuition? Answer: not at all. It is intuition that develops insight into symbolism. Question: are conditions in dreams the same as the conditions after death? Answer: certainly. Question: are dreams of suffocation, drowning and inability to walk and speak a result of one's health? Answer: no, they are results of impressions that have been held in the mind. It is a kind of psychological disorder of the mind, a disease of the mind. The mind must be cured from it. Question: what about dreams that are inspired by a stimulus from the physical body, as for instance a dream inspired by a feeling of pain in the body? Answer: the mind has a reaction upon the body, and the body has a reaction upon the mind. Therefore, it is natural that a bodily disorder may throw its shadow upon the mind and produce the same disorder in the mind. Question: what about dreams of flying? Many people say that they are a bad sign. Answer: I think this is the most interesting thing in the world. You do not need airplanes. Dreams of flying have much to do with biology. Psychologically, they are expressive of the soul's continual effort of rising above the imprisonment and limitation that it experiences in this earthly life. Also, dreams of flying signify a journey awaiting one in the future. Question: will you please tell us what makes a person sing in his sleep? Answer: the dance of his soul. Question: what is the condition of the mind of people who nearly never dream? Are they not imaginative? Answer: I think that they are better than imaginative, they are happy. The truth is that either a very advanced person does not dream much, or a very dense person who never troubles his brain to think. He is quite happy and content without troubling to think. He does not have many dreams. Do not think that you seldom find such souls. You often meet with souls to whom thinking is a trouble, and they would rather not trouble themselves about it. Question: what is the difference between the dream that may be called a vision and the real vision? Answer: vision is vision. The more one knows reality, the less one uses the word real. There is one vision that is seen in the dream, and there is another vision that is seen in a state of trance, a state between dreaming and wakefulness. Inspiration. Inspiration is a higher form of intuition, for it comes as an idea, as a complete theme with its improvisation, as a phrase creative of a poem. Inspiration is a stream of wonder and bewilderment. The really inspired person, whether a writer, a poet, a composer, or whatever may be his work, when once he has received an inspiration, he has found satisfaction not with himself, but with what has come to him. It gives his soul such a relief, for the soul was drawing from something, and that object from which it was drawing has yielded to the soul, has given it what it was asking for. Therefore, inspiration may be called the soul's reward. It is not by being anxious to receive something that one is able to receive it. It is not by straining the brain that one can write poetry. It is not by worrying for days that one can compose a piece of music. One who does so cannot receive inspiration. The one who receives inspiration is quite tranquil and unconcerned about what is coming. Certainly he is desirous of receiving something, he is passionately longing to conceive it. It is by focusing his mind to the divine mind that, consciously or unconsciously, man receives inspiration. This phenomenon is so great and so wonderful that its joy is unlike any other joy in the world. It is in this joy that the inspirational genius experiences ecstasy. It is a joy that is almost indescribable. It is an upliftment. One feels that one is raised from the earth when one's mind is focused on the divine mind, for inspiration comes from the divine mind. What the great musicians, poets, thinkers, philosophers, writers and prophets have left to the world is always uplifting, although it is not every soul who comprehends their work fully, and therefore not every soul can enjoy it fully. But imagine their own enjoyment of what came to them. There are no words to express it. It is an inspiration that one begins to see the sign of God, and the most materialistic genius begins to wonder about the divine spirit when once inspiration has begun to come to him. One might ask, does inspiration come as a finished picture? Does it come as a written letter? No. It comes to an artist as if his hand were taken by someone else, as if his eyes were closed and his heart were open. He has drawn something, he has painted something, and he does not know who painted it, who drew it. Inspiration comes to a musician as if someone else were playing or singing, and he were only taking it down a complete melody, a perfect air. After he has written it down, then it enchants his soul. To a poet, inspiration comes as if someone were dictating and he were only writing. There is no strain on his brain, there is no anxiety in receiving it. It is therefore that many confuse inspiration with spirit communication. Many inspirational people are glad to attribute inspiration to a spirit, knowing that it does not come from themselves, but it is not always spirit communication. It is natural that inspiration should come from a being living just now on earth or from someone who has passed. Yet the most profound inspiration comes always from the divine mind, and to God alone the credit is due. Even if an inspiration comes through the mind of a person living on earth or through a soul who has passed on to the other side, it still has come from God, for all knowledge and wisdom belong to God. It is a fault on the part of mankind to attribute inspiration to some limited being who is nothing but a shadow covering God. When a person believes that an old Egyptian comes from the other side to inspire him or that an American Indian comes to lead him on his way, he builds a wall between himself and God. Instead of receiving directly from the source that is perfect and all-sufficient, he is picturing his limited idea, making it a screen between himself and God. The best way for the genius is to make himself an empty cup, free from pride of learning or conceit of knowledge, to become as innocent as a child who is ready to learn whatever may be taught to him. It is the one who becomes as a child before God, at the same time longing and yearning to express music through his soul, who becomes a fountain of God. From that fountain divine inspiration rises and brings beauty before all those who see the fountain. There is one step further, And that is when the person no longer remains a poet or a musician or a philosopher, but becomes God's instrument only. Then God begins to speak to him through everything, not only in music or verse, in color or line, but he begins to communicate with God in all forms. Everything he sees, above or below, before or behind, right or left, either heavenly or earthly, is communicative. He then begins to speak with God, and it is this step that is called revelation. There is a story of Moses relating that when he was looking for fire to bake bread, he happened to see a light on the top of a mountain. So, in order to take this fire, he climbed to the top of the mountain, but there the fire became lightning. Moses could no longer withstand that great flashing, and he fell to the ground. When he awoke, he began to communicate with God. This story is allegorical. The idea is that Moses was looking for light to make it his life's sustenance, but he had to climb onto the higher planes. It was not possible to get it on earth where he stood. It was necessary that he should climb to the top. And then there was not only a light, but it was lightning. It was a light that was beyond the power of Moses to withstand, and he fell down. What is this falling down? To become nothing, to become empty. When he reached that state of emptiness, then his heart became sonorous, and he found communication with God through everything in the world, in the rock, tree or plant, in the star, sun or moon, in whatever he saw he found communication with his soul. So, everything revealed its nature and secret to Moses. It is in connection with this revelation that Sati says that every leaf of the tree becomes a page of the sacred scripture, once the soul has learned to read. Question: I quite understand that inspiration comes from God. But would you kindly explain how one receives inspiration from a person on earth whom one does not know? Answer: inspiration comes through the mediumship of a living being in three forms. When you are in the presence of someone who is inspiring, when you are in the thoughts of someone who is inspiring, and when your heart is in a state of perfect tranquility and inspiration that is flowing through the heart of an inspirational genius comes into your heart. It is just like the wireless. Sometimes you connect it with a certain station from which you are to receive the music, and sometimes you do not connect it, but it remains a wireless machine. If anything passing through is not received, it is not heard, but the sound is there just the same. In the same way, one receives inspiration from these three different sources. Question: when inspiration comes originally from the divine mind, must it always be vehicled by someone who has passed on, or who is on earth? Answer: there are different processes. It all depends upon how the heart of the person is focused on the divine spirit. There is a person whose heart is focused directly on the divine spirit, and there is another to whom the divine spirit is too remote. His heart is focused on a center, and this center is focused on the divine spirit, from where it receives the message. So, it all comes from the divine spirit just the same. Phrases to be repeated. The following sentences were composed by Hazrat Inayat Khan to be used, according to the needs of each person, as phrases to be repeated 10 or 20 times at fixed times every day. Bless, Lord, my life with thy divine blessing. I am well and happy in the life and light of God. Guide me to the purpose for which I am born on the earth. My balance is secure in the hands of God. Grant me, Lord, thy wisdom, joy and peace. Providence has blessed me. Success is my birthright. Bless my life with every bliss. Help my life to fulfill its purpose. Complete my life by the grace of thy divine perfection. My body, heart and soul radiate the healing spirit of God. Balance my life, that I may know and act right. May my life become powerful and harmonious. I seek my supply in God. Grant me to have all power and wisdom, that I may best fulfill my life's purpose. Give me, Lord, thy divine influence which I may spread among my dear ones. Help me to serve thy cause. O Spirit of guidance, throw thy divine light on my path. Open my heart, that thy spirit it may reflect. My life is changing and taking a better turn. My mind is still, my thought is steady, my sight is keen, my life is balanced. Harmonize my soul, Lord, with all people and with all conditions. My body is healed, my mind is fortified, and my soul is illuminated by the grace of God. Fortify my heart. Give me a new life and new inspiration, that I may see in life thy divine inspiration. Make my heart thy divine temple. And that's not all. Our experts and regular viewers respond to all comments. Also check if you forgot to subscribe and set your bell to receive notifications about new audiobooks and other useful self-development materials that we release regularly. Join in the discussions, don't forget to give likes and, if possible and inspired, support the development of the channel financially. All useful links will be in the description and the first attached comment. Goodness, love and wisdom to all. And now move on to watch the next part of the video at the links below, or choose something from the playlists of the channel and those you see on the screen.